Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we are going to continue reading our ancient mysteries, and of course, just as the last time, all the credit goes to the History magazine. So let's start. The first one is very interesting, at least to me, and it is the ghost stories of ancient Rome, from the bone-chilling to the absurd. Ghost stories appear in several surviving texts from ancient Rome. What do they reveal about the people who told them? Do you believe in ghosts? That's what preeminent Roman lawyer and statesman Pliny the Younger asked his friend in a letter around AD 100. I should very much like to know whether you think there are such things as ghosts, Pliny wrote, and whether they have their own shapes and some divine existence, or whether they are unreal images that take their forms from our own anxieties. Pliny was writing to his friend Sura, a Roman senator. To give Sura some food for thought, Pliny recounted 3 spooky stories he had heard. The first was about a man who saw an apparition that predicted his political success and also his death. The second was about a house and the chanting ghost who haunted it. The third was about incidents that had supposedly happened in Pliny's own home, but more on that later. Ghost stories appear in multiple ancient Roman texts, yet unlike the thrillers of today, they are often only a couple of sentences long. For example, in the Roman historians Plutarch's account of the life of an Athenian general, he briefly mentioned a Greek bathhouse that became haunted after a murder. For a long while after, apparitions continuing to be seen and groans to be heard in that place, so our fathers have told us. They ordered the gates of the baths to be built up, Plutarch wrote. And even to this day, those who live in the neighborhood believe that they sometimes see specters and hear alarming sounds. But what did ancient Romans really make of ghosts? We looked for clues by examining the types of spectral stories that circulated the ancient Rome. Haunted houses. Pliny's letter contains this wonderful haunted house ghost story that is persistent throughout antiquity, says Daniel Ogden, an ancient history professor in the University of Exeter, and author of Magic, Witchcraft, and Ghosts in the Greek and Roman Worlds. In his letter to Sura, Pliny said he had heard a story about a house in Athens haunted by a spectre who wore frighteningly loud chains. The house became abandoned until one day a philosopher decided to take up residence. While writing at night by lamplight, the philosopher heard the ghost chains getting closer and closer until the spirit appeared in the room with him. Ogden sees the haunted house story in Pliny's letter as part of a folklore tradition that stretched back to ancient Greece and continued after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Haunted house stories in this tradition often had similar features, like a heroic figure. In pagan stories, like Pliny's, the hero is a philosopher. In a late 5th century Christian version, a hero is a bishop. The earliest major Roman haunted house story is the Mostellaria, or The Haunted House, a comedy by the playwright Plautus, circa 200 BC. The play appears to be based on a lost Greek comedy called The Phasma from the late 4th or early 3rd century BC, suggesting that haunted house folklore goes back at least that far. In the Mostellaria, I don't know. An enslaved man tries to convince his superstitious master, who has just returned home from a long journey, that he shouldn't enter his house because it's haunted. In reality, he is lying to cover for the master's son, who has been partying in the house during his father's absence. Improper burials. Though the enslaved man's story about the ghost is comically contradictory, it underscores another recurring theme in ancient Roman ghost stories: improper burial. Proper burial was extremely important, says Debbie Felton. In ancient Roman ghost stories, remaining unburied or being buried improperly was the most likely thing to cause the haunting. Pliny's haunted house story also involves an improper burial. Instead of turning away in fear, the philosopher allowed the ghost to lead him to a spot outside where the ghost disappeared. In the morning, the philosopher asked local magistrates to dig up that spot, and they discovered human remains wrapped in chains. After giving the remains a proper burial, the haunting ceased. Semi-divine intervention. Even if you are not being haunted, ancient Roman stories suggest it was still a good idea to give a proper burial to any corpse you come across, because its ghost might help you out later. The Roman orator and statesman Cicero recorded an early ghost story in this Grateful Dead genre of folklore around 44 BC. In Cicero's dialogue, De Divinatione, or On Divination, a poet named Simonides finds a man's corpse and gives it a proper burial. Afterward, the man's ghost rewards Simonides by warning him not to go on an upcoming voyage because the ship will wreck. He heeds the ghost's advice and avoids death, at least for himself. Not all spectral figures were the ghosts of the dead. Ancient Romans also recorded tales of large semi-divine apparitions. The Roman historian Suetonius wrote that Julius Caesar saw such an apparition before crossing the Rubicon River at the start of his civil war. And in Pliny's letter to Sura, he opened with a story about an apparition who correctly predicted a man's political rise. Both tales frame the apparition seers' successes as products of destiny or fate, making them sound more like political propaganda than spooky stories. Not me going on a tangent right at the start of the video, but there is like heavy machinery operating something outside, and they're like dragging things on the ground. It's 8 p.m. people. Seriously, on a Saturday. Just chill and go away. You had the entire day to do this, but no, the timing is now. Anyway, I'll wait. If you hear any noises, it's because I gave up. Okay? There we go. Back to the story. But what did Romans actually believe? Like people today, ancient Romans had varying personal beliefs about whether there was an afterlife and whether a dead person's ghost or some other spirit could appear to the living. However, scholars point out that of the three main surviving written haunted house stories, two are comedic or satirical. By mocking haunted house tales, these stories assume their audience is already familiar with the concept of haunted houses, probably through oral storytelling. In addition, their tone suggests that not everyone believed such tales. For instance, the last major Roman haunted house story appears in a dialogue by Lucian, a 2nd century satirist from Roman Syria. In one part of the dialogue, known as the Philopseudes, or the lover of lies, a philosopher tells a listener about encountering a haunted house in Corinth. Like Pliny's hero, Lucian's philosopher says he ended the haunting by finding the spirit's remains and facilitating a proper burial. Yet, the skeptical listener doesn't believe him, perhaps inviting readers to question the ghost stories they have heard, too. And what did Pliny believe? You might look to clues from the last ghost story in his letter, the one that happened in his house. Pliny wrote that two people staying in his residence, one of them an enslaved boy, the other the brother of the servant, had woken up on different days to find that someone had cut their hair while they slept. The hair trimmings were still beside them, and both claimed to have seen mysterious figures in the night. Pliny ended his letter to his friend Sura by urging him to respond with a direct answer about whether he thought ghosts were real, so as not to leave me in suspense and uncertainty, since the point is that I am consulting you to end my doubts. We'll never know what really happened in Pliny's house or how Sura responded, but we have a theory. I think someone was playing a practical joke on Pliny, we say, and he just didn't get it. And that is the story on haunted houses and ghosts in Roman Empire. I find it curious that it's such a kind of relatable story that we still hear nowadays, and in a way it's also exactly the same, that someone was either murdered or again which resulted in improper burial perhaps, and then this person is haunting a place or a house or the person who offended them. But anyway, I find it curious that it was already an ongoing situation a while ago. Our next story is related to the burials, but is a bit more serious and also important to me, and hopefully you will be interested as well. The graves of women warriors are changing what we know about ancient gender roles. Recent scientific reevaluation of remains have historians rethinking the prevalence of women fighters throughout history. In the 1980s, a confusing collection of artifacts turned up in a 10th century grave in Hungary. A bow, an arrowhead, and jewelry. Early studies suggested that the person in the grave was probably male, but a new look at the skeleton has revealed that the person was in fact female. The revelation gives a fresh perspective on the debate about women as ancient warriors. The researchers are careful not to suggest that the women carried the bow in war rather than for hunting, say, or for defense when herding livestock. but they have not ruled out the possibility that her society considered her to be a warrior, while experts point out the idea that only men could be warriors is biased by modern ideas. It is tempting to refer to her as a warrior, but we have chosen to leave the question open, explains bioarchaeologist Balas, I will butcher this name, Balas Tihani. He notes mounted archers were crucial for Hungarian warfare at the time, and if the woman was a skilled archer and horse rider, then she may have participated in battles. On the other hand, bows were also used for hunting, and many Hungarian women from that time, especially from the semi-nomadic Magyar culture, carried bows for self-defense and to protect the livestock, he says. A flurry of such misidentifications have emerged in the last decade, including the discovery of a young woman buried with stone projectiles points about 9,000 years ago in Peru, a woman buried with a sword and shield about 2,000 years ago in Britain's Isles of Scilly, a possibly non-binary person buried with a sword in Finland 1,000 years ago, and a warrior grave of a Viking woman in Sweden. What was in the Hungarian burial? Archaeologists first discovered the ancient cemetery in Hungary in the mid-1980s, near the village of Székelyudvari, about 100 miles east of Budapest. Farmers wanted to develop the land, so archaeologists carried out careful excavations to document it while they still could. More than 260 graves were found, dating from the Bronze Age to the time of the Magyar conquest of Carpathian Basin region in the 9th and 10th centuries. Like many of the graves of many men in the centuries from the same time, grave number 63 contain evidence of archery, an arrowhead, pieces of an iron quiver, and the middle section from a bow made from antler. The ends of the bow were made from wood and have rotted away. But it also contained jewelry typical of the graves of women at the site, including buttons, beads, and a ring for holding long hair. The remains from the excavations were eventually stored at the University of Szeged, where Tihani and his colleagues have studied them over the last few years. The first step in trying to identify the gender of an ancient skeleton is usually to look at the shape of their bones and the goods they took with them to the grave. DNA sequencing and genomic analysis can also tell researchers whether the individual had X or Y chromosomes. The researchers examined the pelvis and skull, as well as DNA recovered from a tooth, an inner ear bone, and a fragment of bone from the left upper arm. All of these approaches identify the person as female. In addition, evidence of healed injuries, wear on the joints, and indications of the bone-weakening disease osteoporosis suggested the woman had been physically active during her life, but was middle-aged or elderly when she died. The burials of other women in the region often contain traces of weapons, such as single arrowhead, but these items have typically been interpreted not as weapons, but as amulets with symbolic or superstitious significance. The weapons, goods, and style of grave 63 match the weapons found in the male graves in the cemetery. Yet, determining whether this individual was a warrior is a more complex question that remains open to debate due to lack of definitive evidence. Of course, because anything that women do requires double, triple, quadruple proof, even in death. Was her bow used for hunting or warfare? Hunting weapons have been found in the graves of several prehistoric women, which suggests hunting was an important task that women in many ancient societies did. Biological anthropologist Kara Wall-Scheffler, who has reviewed studies of prehistoric women hunters, says the style and technology of such weapons can be used to distinguish them, as well as earlier injuries and wear from physical activities preserved in skeletons. But I think people have to be able to move between different kinds of tasks in order to survive, she says. So someone who primarily hunted may also have fought in battles. British historian Bethany Hughes, an expert on women who may have been warriors, says she has seen evidence in the Caucasus region between the Black and the Caspian Seas, including many skeletons of prehistoric women with healed injuries that could only have been received in battle. Some also show signs of frequent horse riding and of shooting hundreds of arrows, many more that would have been needed for hunting. Hughes notes that women in the most mountainous parts of the region recall how their great-grandmothers told stories about covering their faces to be mistaken for men during battles in the lowlands. We might think of these stories as legends, but this is something that is within living memory in some of those villages. A Viking leader. While the function of weapons remains ambiguous for burials like the one in Hungary, there is now no doubt about the Viking burial at Birka in Sweden. The woman there was buried in the style of the leading warrior, with swords, arrowheads, a spear, and 2 sacrificed horses. Her grave also contains a bag of gaming pieces and a board game, which suggests the study of strategy by a military leader. Archaeologist Charlotte Hedden Stierna Johnson, who has analyzed the grave, says the elaborate burial shows the woman was an elite member of her community. I don't think that gender is important, she says. We make it important today, but I think the main feature of this individual is that she was a warrior. Most Viking women were likely not warriors, so this woman might have inherited the role. I think she came from a family that was expected to have this position as a war leader, and for some reason she was the one in the family that could uphold that position. Still, she knows that the usual custom in Viking burials was cremation, which destroys all DNA. So other Viking warriors, assumed to be men, may have been women, too. Testing teeth. Even when DNA is present, it can be too old or too degraded to give scientists gender information. One of the reasons why so many misidentified warrior graves have turned up in the last few years may be the availability to archaeologists in the last 10 years or so of a sex test based on human tooth enamel, which contains slightly different version of the amelogen proteins depending on whether the person is male or female. Instead of relying only DNA analysis to determine the sex of human remains, archaeologists can now test tooth enamel for the telltale proteins, even when the DNA is too badly degraded to be of any use. A melatonin sex estimation has been a game changer for answering questions about gender in the past, says archaeologist Randy Haas, who used the technique to determine the sex of the person in the Peru burial. Teeth can survive even when other bones have weathered away, he says, and the proteins in tooth enamel can last much longer than DNA. A melatonin analysis is also less expensive than DNA analysis. Archaeologist Anna Westman of Norway University, who has studied the female Viking grave in Birka in Sweden, says the technique has revitalized the study of the many human remains now kept in storage at museums. These kinds of studies also add nuance to the often binary ideas we have about gender roles in prehistoric societies, she says. A change to history. Archaeologist Simon Mays in the UK University of Southampton, who led the excavations on the Isles of Scilly, argues that it is logical to accept that the woman buried with a bow in the Hungary grave may have been a warrior. The inclusion of weapons seems to be common here in male burials and seems to indicate a martial role. So I think we ought to accept it for her too, he says. Violence was pervasive in prehistoric societies, says Mays. And while women seldom seem to have taken part in raiding parties, they will defend themselves and their families when attacked with anything that comes to hand. He suspects several women buried with weapons were later assumed to have been men, and that new techniques for determining sex, such as a melogenin analysis, could reveal many more. I would not mind betting that if one did this, a few more female warriors would turn up. The discoveries of such women have already challenged stereotypes and historical assumptions that only men fought in warfare, and they may even be starting to change a perception of history. Anthropologist Marin Pilaut in the University of Nevada, Reno, who has studied the prehistoric remains of women hunters, sees greater openness to the idea that some women, at least, were in fact warriors. I think archaeologists are starting to recognize that we cannot interpret the past based on how we may perceive the present, she said. Anyway, I selected this article because I really enjoyed reading a similar one recently. It was indicating that, again, more and more burials that were discovered from like Ice Age era and pre-civilization era, these burials were from women, meaning that they took a lot of action in the hunting and not only in, gathering, comparing to what certain type of people tend to say nowadays or previously. Oh, this is a skeleton with a weapon or something, must be a man, because of course must be a man. Anyway, and since the current situation is a bit more seemingly coming back to that point, I just wanted to again read this. Not that this is a mystery or anything, but there we go. I think that my mood got a bit down because of the heavy machinery incident and the time that I had to wait. Anyway, I'm still here. I'm still gonna read one more article, and this one I hopefully will bring my mood up. So it is about Chinese Zodiac. So what is the Chinese Zodiac? how the ancient calendar shaped life for centuries. Long before Western astrology, the Chinese zodiac helped organize years, beliefs, and social life. Here's how the system of 12 animals evolved over the centuries. Are you a rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, or pig? I am a goat. I'm a double goat. In certain, I'm gonna explain. In certain countries, the goat is replaced with a sheep. I think Korea, Japan, and a few others. And I think that rabbit is replaced with a cat sometimes. I don't know, don't quote me on that, but I think that some countries differ on the animals. But my Chinese zodiac is goat, and my zodiac, my star sign or whatever it's called, is Aries, which is the ram. So there we go. I'm there in the family. That question is central to the Chinese zodiac, an ancient astrological system still relevant in Chinese culture and around the world today. Rife with myth and legend, the system assigns different years and animals to people born in each year, then projects personality traits based on those animals' behaviors. This Chinese New Year is the reign of the horse. But how did the zodiac come to be, and why is it still so important in modern China? Here's what you need to know about the astrological system and its echoes in modern life. The Chinese zodiac's ancient origins. Also known as Shang Xiao or Shu Xiang, the zodiac's origin story is unclear. According to legend, the system resulted from a mythical animal race held by either the Buddha or the Jade Emperor, a godlike figure in Chinese folk religion. One such myth explains that Jade Emperor wanted to create a zodiac system based on animals, so he invited all animals to race for a sport in the system. The order in which they successfully crossed a river or showed up at court is reflected in the progression of animals each year, with every 12-year period beginning with the year of the rat and ending with the year of the pig. Various versions of the folklore tale exist, highlighting the different animals' characteristics as the reason for their positions in the zodiac. The crafty rat, for example, is first in the cycle because myths state it hitched a ride on the back of the next animal, the ox. Other zodiac origin legends hold that the animals didn't race at all, but rather attended a banquet held by the Buddha before he departed Earth. The order in which the animals showed up at the banquet is said to have influenced their order in the zodiac. Though the exact timing of the zodiac's emergence is unclear, its 12 animal groupings are thought to have been in use by the Zhan Guo, or warning states period, of the 5th through 3rd centuries BC. Their popularity increased from there, and by the AD 550, the zodiac animals had been codified and became popular stereotypes that endure to this day. A 12-year cycle. Though the 12-year lunar calendar-based zodiac is the best-known zodiac system in China today, it isn't the only such cycle in Chinese culture. The 28th mansion system follows the moon's transit along the equator over the course of a year, producing 28 signs. One of China's many calendar systems, the stems and branches system, is considered an important way to plan and predict auspicious events too. Everything from a child's given name to the date of a trip might be planned with the help of some or all of these calendar systems. All these traditions stem from a long-standing practice of tying astronomical events to fate. As historian Endymion Porter Wilkinson notes, astronomers were important figures in ancient Chinese courts, where they also served as astrologers and scribes in service of the emperor. Their work was especially valuable because portents. Why is my brain flipping because of this word? Anyway, because portents were interpreted to indicate whether or not a ruler was in conformity with heaven. And astronomers saw astrological symbols as an extremely important symbol of the ruler's legitimacy and the correctness of his rule. Astronomy was so prized that only the ruling dynasty's astronomers could set and distribute a calendar. Eventually, though, the Chinese Zodiac filtered down into the wider populace, becoming a beloved folk tradition. Though it isn't clear how exactly ancient astrologers came up with these systems, some researchers believe the 12-year cycle of Sheng Xiao was inspired by sightings of Jupiter as it slowly moved through the night sky. The planet's cycle eventually drifts, according to University of Pennsylvania East Asian expert Adam Smith. Other cultures with Chinese influences use similar zodiacs, but the animals can vary. For example, Korean zodiacs use the sheep instead of the goat. See, I told you. While in Vietnam, the water buffalo replaces the ox. The Vietnamese version of the zodiac also includes the cat instead of the rabbit. Cats were not introduced to China until about 1,400 years ago, after the zodiac had already emerged. What a sad, sad time to be with no cats. No cats. Sad. The Chinese zodiac in modern culture. Despite its murky origin story, the 12-year zodiac has survived the centuries, and its importance to Chinese folk culture and modern-day China is undeniable. The zodiac is often used in naming, and a person's zodiac year is popularly thought to be relevant to family life, personality, luck, and destiny. These zodiac beliefs are considered part of Chinese folk religion and have increased in popularity in the years since the end of China's Cultural Revolution, which repressed expressions of Chinese history and folk traditions in favor of the teachings of Mao Zedong. Though these traditions can be hard to quantify, one group of social scientists estimated 578 million adherents of folk religions in mainland China alone in 2012, about 55% of the population at the time. The stereotypes presented by the zodiac animals are so prevalent their popularity can be measured indirectly in terms of dollars, cents, and even birth rates. In the 1990s, demographer Daniel Goodkind found that the 1976 and 1988 years of the dragon had seen surging fertility rates in China and Chinese-speaking countries, a result of people re-engaging with the widespread belief that a child born during a year of dragon will have a lucky life. In the years since, the year of the dragon baby boom has been less pronounced. Honestly, my older brother is from 1988 brain, and I have never seen a person as lucky as him. Like when we were children, people would like shunt me away because like I was the bad luck, while like they would take my brother with them to go places because he was such a lucky child. Anyway, sorry about my trauma dumping here. But you know, maybe there is something in the zodiac truth here, because I'm from the year of the goat, that I think I don't know much about the zodiac and what it means in general. I just know what each year is, more or less. But from what I can remember, maybe reading like a long time ago, the year of people born in the year of the goat usually are not very lucky. Though no birth rate or astrological sign has ever been proven to influence personality or luck, a belief in astrology does affect how people behave. The Chinese Zodiac is no exception, and beliefs and stereotypes about birth years have historically affected matchmaking decisions, parental investments in their children, and even hiring in China. Wow. Popular stereotypes about the signs even influence people's willingness to take risks, studies suggest. One 2022 study in the Journal of Management Science, for example, found that survey respondents were 2 percentage points likelier to favor no-risk investments during their zodiac year, which is commonly associated with bad luck. Okay, so you can't invest money when it is your year. Okay. This effect extended to corporate decision-making, the researchers found, with research investments and corporate acquisitions both declining during the zodiac year of company chairperson. Wow. Okay. Serious. I mean, going back to my story from my brother being dragon, I don't know, and lucky. I'm not saying that I'm not lucky, but things never come easy to me. I really have to struggle, you know, like a goat, go high up in the mountain, barely hold myself up just to lick some salt so I don't die. 2026, the year of the horse. In recent years, the zodiac has become better known worldwide, and Lunar New Year celebrations worldwide often draw upon its symbolism. So, what is in store for this year, the year of the horse? The animal is associated with responsibility and stability. I don't think so. With a bit of a wild side and a fierce independent streak. Saddle up. For 2026, a year that, according to the Chinese Zodiac, could contain opportunity, strength, and adventure. Let me tell you, this person who wrote this article, let me hold your hand when I'm saying this. It did not go the way that, you know, we may have expected. Responsibility, stability. I don't see any of that. I don't see any responsibility. I don't see any stability. Everything is wild side. Anyway, And it's not even adventure-like. It's just a shit show. Anyway, and that concludes me reading about the Chinese Zodiac. I thought I was curious. I thought that maybe they would provide a bit more information on how it developed, but it makes sense. They mentioned that it could be related to Jupiter, and then of course we already know that like constellations that are on the sky also rotate in cycles of 12. Maybe it's like a similar inspiration coming from different sides of the world, because of the world, because from what I can recall that I read again a while ago, that the zodiac sun signs, the Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, all of those are coming from Mesopotamia. It was something that they started, and then it went to Greek people, ancient Greece, and they named them the signs in that way that we know today. So I think that the zodiac, it's like zodiac is related to the type of being. I think it's kind of like the cycles of animals or something like that, even though not all the zodiac signs are animals. But maybe it is, they were animals, and I don't really know. Just saying what I can remember. I haven't really researched neither of the zodiacs before. Maybe just read something that I saw in a magazine here and there, just curiosity wise. But I'm also not a strong believer in these things. I think that there could be some reasoning for why in certain alignments of the universe, whatever, it could be that is relatable, but like not everyone born in the year of 1988 is lucky. Same as not everyone who was born in the year of 1991, the goat, is unlucky. Am I right, or am I right? So there we go. And yeah, I think it's curious. Maybe I will read a bit more about different types and what is the description of their personalities. Maybe I will not. We will see. But that concludes our reading for today. It was an eventful one. I can say that I enjoyed all of it, unfortunately, because of all the noise, but I'm hoping that you will not notice the noise. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Bye!